The waters of the Hormuz appear calm today. But behind that calm lies a calculated silence where every boundary is stretched to the limit. Between the barren cliffs lies the throat of the world, where the dark blood of the global economy flows under the watchful eye of hidden forces. In this unpredictable confrontation, each passing ship carries not only oil, but also the fragile fate of an order teetering on the brink of upheaval. Beneath the seabed of the Sea of Hormuz, another world begins to unfold. Above, the scorching sun and harsh conditions of the bay prevail, while below lies an ecosystem shaped by extraordinary resilience and adaptability. Here, coral reefs are not simply colourful shapes scattered across the seabed. They are organisms that have survived a long struggle, living structures that have endured thousands of years, adapting to conditions that many other reefs cannot overcome. In waters that can reach 97 degrees Fahrenheit, these reefs have learned to survive while most of the world's coral reef systems are beginning to decline. Some 700 species of fish move through these coral reefs, filling the surface with constant movement, flashes of colour, and the tranquil rhythm of a perfectly functioning ecosystem. Some species weave between the coral branches in tiny silver schools. Others float in the deep blue water like shadows, disappearing and reappearing with the current. They form a rich and interconnected network of life that extends far beyond the reef itself. It spreads to food systems, coastal livelihoods, and the daily survival of communities throughout the region. Above those coral reefs lies one of the most consequential waterways on the planet. Every day, around 21 million barrels of crude oil move through the Strait of Hormuz, equal to roughly 20% of the world's total supply. The sheer volume here is almost immeasurable, yet it dictates the rhythm of our lives. From energy sources powering heavy production to the stability of global markets, everything must pass through this geographical eye of the needle. Watching the colossal ships move in rows laden with machinery, we see the pulse of modern civilization at work. But this steady rhythm conceals a breathtaking fragility. A single day of congestion here is not merely a localized delay, it is a cross-border shock, triggering market turmoil and political crises thousands of miles away. The Hormuz is not simply a waterway, it is a critical weak point embedded in the very fabric of modern operation. This is the underlying rhythm of international stability. As long as the flow remains unobstructed, cracks in the global structure are hidden. But the moment the flow stops, order will immediately plunge into a dark and uncertain void. Located at the mouth of the narrow Strait of Hormuz, Larak resembles a crucial junction. Its position gives it a vital role in monitoring the flow of ships through one of the world's most turbulent waterways. And even recent maritime warnings have directed ships to bypass the island, demonstrating the close monitoring of this area. Along parts of the shore, the water can ignite in electric blue as bioluminescent plankton flash with motion, turning each wave and footstep into a pulse of light. Yet that glow depends on the presence of delicate marine life, which makes it vulnerable to the pressures gathering around Hormuz, including heavier ship traffic and pollution.
Your Kumlari dialect say door.
Some residents of Larak speak Kumzari, a rare Iranian language spoken on both sides of the Strait of Hormuz, which is a blend of Old Persian, Arabic, and even Portuguese/English. It is the only indigenous Indo-European language spoken on the Arabian Peninsula, primarily in Oman and Larak. Located on Larak Island is a ruined Portuguese fort built during the time when the imperial powers vied for control of this sea region, now exposed to wind, salt and heat. Constructed from coral and red mud, it has not been polished and is slowly being eroded by the sea breeze. This fort represents the collapse of old maritime empires. On the southern side of the Strait of Hormuz, Musendam, Norway of the Middle East, rises like a wall of stone. This Omani peninsula does not simply border the strait, it helps define it. Its mountains and inlets sit beside one of the most sensitive maritime passages on Earth, where global shipping moves through water that is both commercially vital and strategically exposed. In a region where geography can shape diplomacy, this narrow finger of land has become one of the quiet anchors of the Strait's fragile balance. Locally, these sea inlets are known as khors, and they give the peninsula its famous comparison to Norway. Norway's fjords were carved by glaciers, while Musendam's deep inlets emerged through tectonic forces and the drowning of ancient valleys as the peninsula tilted and the sea moved inland. The result is a landscape of towering limestone walls, steep gorges and narrow green channels that cut deep inland. In some places, sheer cliffs plunge down to the sea. Many villages along these inlets remained accessible only by boat, with the sea serving as both road and lifeline. The isolation is part of what gives Musendam its atmosphere. The mountains press close, the water runs dark and still beneath them, and every settlement seems to exist because people learned how to live with the land. Even now, the peninsula carries the feeling of a place that has always had to negotiate with distance, heat, and scarcity. That same coastline also leads to Kasab Port, the peninsula's modern maritime hinge. Set at the northern edge of Oman, facing the Strait of Hormuz, the port turns Musandam's dramatic isolation into something practical and strategic. Ferries, cruise vessels, and cargo traffic move through here, linking this rugged outpost to larger trade networks that stretch across the Gulf and beyond. Kasab did not erase the isolation of its terrain, but transformed it into a strategic observation point, ensuring that this outpost remained a vital link in the functioning of the Gulf region. Among the communities most closely associated with this landscape are the Shihu, often described as the mountain people of Musandam. They are famous for their distinctive greeting howl, nabba, and eerie sound that echoes throughout the canyons. Their history is tied to a hard environment where movement between coast and upland once followed the seasons. One of the clearest traces of that world survives in the Beit al-Kufl, or lock house, a stone storage structure built to protect grain, water, and other essentials when families moved away during the hotter months. Musandam also holds the memory of a bygone era of global control. On Telegraph Island, the remains of a British relay station still lie in one of the peninsula's large bays. In the 19th century, this tiny island became part of the telegraph line connecting London and Karachi, suggesting Hormuz held strategic value long before the advent of the modern oil economy. The soldiers stationed there endured harsh isolation and extreme heat, and the station was abandoned after only a few years. That is why Oman holds onto this land at all costs. Oman's control of the southern flank of Hormuz places the country in an extremely sensitive position. As a small nation situated beside a waterway that larger powers cannot ignore, this makes Musandam a symbol of a more cautious balancing act. Peace in Hormuz is maintained through vigilance, restraint, and the understanding that a narrow strait can affect far more than the surrounding coastlines. In the vast open space of the Gulf, Abu Musa is not merely a strip of land, it is a strategic link, controlling all the vital maritime routes of the global economy. Although located further from the mainland than any other Iranian island in the Persian Gulf, this very location gives the island direct access to international shipping lanes, where all the flows of the global economy converge on the Strait of Hormuz. Abu Musa stands near one of the world's most sensitive maritime choke points, and the wider Strait of Hormuz remains a passage whose disruption can shake global oil flows within days. When traffic through Hormuz collapsed, global oil supplies were cut by about 1/5, and ships were diverted through tightly controlled waters near Iranian islands. The island is administered by Iran, while the United Arab Emirates continues to claim sovereignty over it as part of Sharjah. The modern dispute is rooted in the 1971 memorandum between Iran and Sharjah, signed just before the UAE was formed. That agreement did not settle sovereignty. Instead, it created an arrangement under which neither side abandoned its claim. Iranian troops would occupy agreed areas while Sharjah would retain jurisdiction over the remainder of the island. However, over the decades, Iran has consolidated its control over the entire island. Today, Abu Musa stands as a fortified defensive position where access is entirely dominated by defensive considerations. Yet within this high-pressure environment lies a stark contrast. On one side is the tranquil life of fishing families and children attending school. On the other are missile launches and long-range radar hidden in caves or beneath rocky mountain ridges. Furthermore, Abu Musa is renowned for its red oxide deposits, part of a mineral resource that has contributed to the island's value long before the current dispute arose. And scientific studies suggest that restricted access has also helped preserve relatively intact coastal ecosystems and healthy coral reefs. This is the operational epicenter of the strait, a city where every shipment and every signal ripples across the global economy. Bandar Abbas feels like a city built in layers, each one left behind by a different current of the Indian Ocean. For centuries, trade across the Gulf and the wider ocean brought merchants, sailors, labourers, and enslaved people through this port. And over time, that movement helped form an Iranian community along Iran's southern coast. Arab, Persian, Indian, African, and later European influences all passed through here, leaving traces not only in commerce but in music, ritual, and the social fabric of the port itself. The most evident manifestation of this multifaceted identity is the Zar ritual, a healing ceremony rooted in beliefs about spirit possession found along the southern coast of Iran. According to local understanding, certain illnesses or states of suffering may be caused by harmful winds or spirits, also known as Zar, entering the body. This ritual is performed with music, drumming, chanting, incense, and repetitive movements used to soothe, negotiate with, or appease the possessing force rather than violently expel it. That is what makes Zar special. It lies at the intersection of healing, spirituality, and performing arts, and carries unmistakable connections to the African and Indian Ocean worlds that shaped the port cities of southern Iran. The city also preserves another chapter of its maritime past in the Hindu temple of Bandar Abbas. Built by Indian merchants from Shikarpur in the late 19th century, the temple was created for the Hindu trading community living and working in the port. Its conical dome sets it apart from the surrounding architecture, making it look more like a landmark of the old trading world, where Bandar Abbas had deep ties to India than a typical mosque or courtyard house. This structure shows that the place was once a prosperous and multicultural city, maintaining a distinct presence of Indian merchants, complete with its own sacred architecture. Bandar Abbas is also inseparable from the struggle for control in the Gulf. In 1622, Shah Abbas I, working with English naval support, drove the Portuguese from nearby Hormuz, ending their dominance over the key maritime gateway and shifting regional power in Safavid Iran's favour. Following that victory, the old Gombrun port was renamed Bandar Abbas, or Abbas Port. This renaming also transformed the city into a political statement, a place where imperial competition rewrote the map. Since then, Bandar Abbas has remained a city constantly rebuilding itself on the foundations of its colonial past. At the centre of this global crossroads sits the island that gave the strait its name, a geological fever dream known as the Rainbow Island of Iran, Hormuz Island. Set near the mouth of the strait, this small island, about 16 square miles in area, rises from a giant salt dome that pushes its way upward from deep underground, lifting minerals, volcanic material and ancient sediment into the light. Hills burn red, cliffs fade into yellow and white, and entire valleys shift through purple, green, orange and silver. What gives Hormuz its strange beauty is the chemistry beneath your feet. Iron oxide stains the soil a deep crimson, while salt, gypsum and other minerals scatter lighter tones across the ridges and flats. With over 70 shades visible in the rocks and soil, the island looks like the surface of Mars. Colour is an integral part of the island's identity here. Red ochre, known locally as shellac, has long been used in traditional dyes and products. And in Hormuz, it's even used in the kitchen, added to local dishes like surah. By the late medieval period, Hormuz had become one of the great trading centres of the region, linking commerce between India, China, Persia and the Arab world. Silk, spices, pearls and precious cargo moved across these waters, and Hormuz grew into a place powerful enough to attract the attention of empires. That history still stands in stone at the Fort of Our Lady of the Conception, the Portuguese fortress built in the early 16th century when Lisbon sought control over the key sea lanes of the east. Its thick red walls still hold their place above the shore, weathered, a colonial stronghold planted in one of the most strategic passages on Earth. One of its most striking modern landmarks is Majora Residence, a cluster of colourful domes that echoes the island's own mineral landscape. Built with the participation of local workers and using an earth-based construction method, the project was designed not just as a place to stay, but as a way to generate work and create a different future for the island. Its rounded forms feel almost geological, as if the architecture had risen from the same salt and ochre as the hills around it. Majara embodies the island's unique character, drawing inspiration from its raw colours, lines and textures. The domes capture changing light patterns that make the entire complex look different from hour to hour, soft and tranquil at dawn, radiant under the midday sun, and almost surreal as night falls over the red earth. Between Keshm Island and the mainland, the sea transforms into a place that is both tranquil, exotic, and vibrant. This is the Hara Mangrove Forest, the largest mangrove ecosystem along the Persian Gulf Coast. A protected wetland recognised under UNESCO's Biosphere Reserve Network and also listed under the Ramsar Convention. It does not announce itself with cliffs or bright mineral colours. Hara works in silence, filtering salt, sheltering life, and holding together one of the most delicate ecological systems in the Strait of Hormuz. The trees here are Avamhenia marina, known locally as Hara. They survive where most trees could not, drawing from tidal water and managing salt through highly specialised adaptations. Their leaves carry salt-exuding glands, while their breathing roots, new metaphors, push up through the mud so the tree can take in oxygen from the air when the ground below is waterlogged and oxygen poor. At low tide, those roots rise by the millions, turning the exposed mud into a field of spikes. It is one of the most distinctive sights in the forest, a landscape that looks still at first glance, yet is actually performing a constant act of survival. Then the tide comes back, water climbs over the mudflats and around the trunks until the trees seem to float, their green crowns suspended above the surface like a forest lifted off the land. The forest also lives in local memory. In southern Iran, the Hara tree is widely associated with Avicenna, the great Persian polymath known as Ibn Sina, and some accounts even trace the name of the tree to him. Around Keshem, generations of residents have moved through these waterways by boat, cutting branches and leaves to feed livestock such as goats and camels. What makes Hara so important is that it functions as both lung and cradle. It stabilizes the shoreline, supports biodiversity, and gives juvenile marine life a safer place to grow beneath the shelter of its roots. But that same vulnerability is what makes the forest so exposed to the wider pressures of Hormuz. Mangroves in the Gulf face growing threats from pollution, solid waste, coastal pressure, and oil-related contamination. Just across the channel lies a world of a completely different scale. Keshem, the largest island in the Gulf, where the landscape stretches out like a vast, untamed continent. From above, one can see the shape of a giant dolphin stretched across the water's surface. On land, it retains the pristine appearance of a long, sun-drenched island, where rock, salt, wind, and scarcity have shaped both the land and its inhabitants. The island operates as a UNESCO-protected archive. It boasts one of the most diverse geological landscapes in the region, where each turn seems to reveal a different chapter in Earth's past. One of the island's most haunting places is Stars Valley, known locally as Stala Kafte. It was sculpted by seasonal downpours, runoff, and erosion cutting through softer sedimentary layers, leaving behind sharp columns, hollowed walls, narrow corridors, and stone forms. The landscape keeps changing because the same forces that created it are still at work, slowly reshaping its edges with every rare storm and every season of wind. The valley looks as if it were caught in the middle of becoming something else. Legend says the valley was formed when a star collided with Earth, and after nightfall, it became a place of spirits and strange sounds. The wind whistling through the rocks creates eerie noises, making it a mystical film setting. The shapes of the cliffs, the leaning stone towers, and the uneven walls create the feeling that the entire valley is in motion. Then comes Chaku Gorge, where the story shifts from wonder to survival. On an island as hot and dry as Keshem, fresh water has always mattered more than almost anything else. Chaku was formed where erosion worked along fractures and weaknesses in the rock, gradually widening them into a canyon system within the Salak anticline. The cliffs are carved with cavities, grooves, basins, and honeycomb-like textures, the result of water, wind, salt, and time impacting the rock. Local people have learned to adapt to this landscape. They dig pits and wells in the canyon floor to collect rainwater, transforming a place shaped by scarcity into a place that can sustain life. Its intersecting passages and eroded chambers tell one story, but the rainwater wells tell another, one about adaptation. In Keshem, survival often depended on knowing exactly where water would run, where stone would hold it, and how long that water could last. Chaku preserves that knowledge in physical form. Farther west, Namaktan Salt Cave opens into one of the island's most surreal worlds. Part of the Namaktan Salt Complex, it formed within a great salt dome created by diapirism, the process in which deeply buried salt, unable to bear the pressure of overlying sediments, slowly pushed upward through the Earth's layers. The salt here belongs to the ancient Hormuz Formation dated to roughly 550 million years ago, long before animals ever flourished on land. That deep history is what gives Namaktan its strange authority. Outside, Keshem can be scorching hot. Inside, the air turns cooler. The light begins to fade, and the walls start to glow with salt crystals and streaks of minerals. This is a multicoloured cave system stretching for about 4.3 miles, a world of its own beneath the island. White salt dominates the chambers, but it is broken up by shades of red, orange and purple, where other minerals stain the walls. Masses of salt hang from the ceiling in tiny needles and thicker folds, while slow-moving brine gathers below in reflective pools and shimmering crusts. The whole place looks like a frozen river of time deep underground. The Star Valley shows the land being eroded. Chaku shows how humans learn to survive in that harsh environment. Namakdan shows what the island has stored beneath it over time. They make Keshem a living repository of heat, pressure, erosion, and resilience. The Strait of Hormuz is more than just a military coordinate or an energy choke point. It is a lesson in the resilience of life. From the heat-resistant coral reefs at the seabed to the communities living in wind towers, all demonstrate extraordinary adaptability. The sea here nourishes life, but also carries the currents of ambition, power, and global interests. It is this interplay that makes Hormuz a unique space where beauty, fragility, and strategic pressure coexist. And as the world faces a new era of instability, Hormuz is no longer a distant frontier. It is a testament to the global future.